Thank you, Chair. I have listened carefully to the debate, as well as the previous debates, of course. And it seems to me that the view of the people here is based on two assumptions. The first is that there is a rules-based order, a kind of international legal world order from which relatively small countries, such as the European countries, greatly benefit. And that it is important that we protect and defend this in general terms, that we even wage wars over it in order to preserve that order. And the second, and thus that the war in Ukraine, which would then be a violation of that rules-based order, is therefore legitimized and important for that reason. And the second assumption, the second belief, seems to be that there could be some sort of domino effect that if Russia succeeds in Ukraine and then maybe also takes a part of the Baltic states, that then Poland and Germany and so on would also be at risk, and that all of Europe would then be under that threat. And I absolutely do not believe either of those assumptions. I believe there is absolutely no reason to assume that such a domino theory would apply, that Russia would have the ambition to conquer much more than what they are doing now. In fact, I believe that Russia did not want this entire war in Ukraine at all, but felt compelled to do this, that they had no other option but to do this. And secondly, I also absolutely do not believe that there is a rules-based order that the West respects or anything like that. Over the past 30 years, I have seen the United States leading the way, but especially the Western countries as the ones who have violated what is called international law the most. Time and again, from Reagan's intervention in Grenada and in Latin America to the interventions in Iraq and Libya and Syria, and you name it. The war in Vietnam is actually another example, constantly starting with false flags and then launching attacks on countries. So I actually see the West as the main problem. It's a fundamentally different approach, and for that reason I also see absolutely no need to increase defense spending by 35 billion. I think we could spend that money much better on tax relief for working people in the Netherlands, for pensioners, social security, and so on and so forth. And more broadly, and I will also be submitting a motion on this, by the way, and on a deeper level, I think the perception that still exists here is the image of the world order as it was during the Cold War. And I believe that since the war in Kosovo in 1999, NATO has become a fundamentally different kind of organization. It is no longer a defensive alliance, but has become an offensive alliance. The war in Yugoslavia had absolutely nothing to do with self-defense. The war in Libya in 2011 had even less to do with self-defense. They were wars of aggression. So I believe NATO has also changed structurally. NATO has undergone a metamorphosis. On the outside, it may still look like the same organization, but in essence it has become something completely different. And I really don't see why the Netherlands should be a part of it. Why should we be part of an offensive alliance? What business do we have in all those countries? Why should we support all those wars of aggression? There is no domino threat coming from Russia. There is no international legal order that is in our interest that we need to protect. So again, I don't support it, I don't understand it, I don't see it. And finally, one more point. There is a very clear focus on military confrontation with Russia. There is very clearly no focus on the diplomatic solution. Russia actually just wants a division of Ukraine. Half would go to Russia, the other half would become a neutral zone or something like that. That would be just fine. And so we are letting ourselves get dragged into a military conflict that is also unwinnable. We are deindustrializing. Our entire economy is being destroyed, partly because of those sanctions, partly because of the enormous expenditures. And Russia is experiencing economic growth. Russia is winning this hands down.
4 minutes is, of course, probably far too short for Mr. Baudet to explain how fantastic Russia is and how wonderful that country is. There are now a number of political commentators in The Hague who occasionally say, yes, since the PVV left the cabinet, Forum has suddenly become a somewhat more normal right-wing party that often expresses normal right-wing positions. We have just heard that Russia attacked Ukraine because they were completely backed into a corner. They had no other choice. That is, of course, also why a fleet of kamikaze drones flew into Kyiv this morning and caused 15 casualties. Now, 6 years ago, Mr. Baudet said that MH17 was shot down and that Ukraine is a possible perpetrator. I also know one of the people who was on board a lot of investigations have been conducted. A great deal has been established about it. Does he still think that Ukraine is a possible perpetrator of the downing of MH17 with 198 Dutch citizens on board?
Yes, this is what you call a loaded question, right? There are a few assertions being made before the actual question is asked. Then I do feel tempted to say something about that, because as far as I know, I haven't said anything at all about Russia. I haven't said anything about whether or not that is a commendable political system or about everything that's going on there. I have given a geopolitical analysis of how I think power relations in the world work, and I have shared my view on what I believe is in the Dutch interest, and that's why I'm here. There are 18 million Dutch people who can't pay their energy bills. They notice that gas and electricity are becoming more and more expensive. They see that 35 billion is now being spent on, in fact, American arms lobbies and weapons companies for a war that isn't ours. That's what matters to me. And then regarding the crashed plane, the downed plane, yes, of course, that's a terrible tragedy. So when Mr. Paternotte says, yes, I knew someone who was on that plane, yes, listen, there's no question that it's horrible that this happened. What exactly happened? How did that plane go down? What exactly happened? That is surrounded by major question marks. I think that's a fact that anyone who seriously looks into this matter has to acknowledge. And it's not up to me to say here, I am certain that it happened this way, or I am certain that it happened that way. It's terrible that it happened. It's very strange the way that Weser investigation was conducted. All the alternative scenarios that weren't included, that weren't investigated. And in my opinion, all real knowledge starts with recognizing what you don't know and also asking yourself, cui bono? Where do the interests lie? Who exactly has an interest in what? The primary radar data still haven't been released. Ukraine has had a veto right from the very beginning when it comes to admitting evidence. There are still a lot of open questions. And listen, I have absolutely no stake in this. It really doesn't matter to me for the political analysis of the conflict in Ukraine how exactly this happened. In my view, it's also not some kind of moral pissing contest. We need to think about what the Dutch interest is and why we are involved in this war. And that's a business-like discussion, a factual discussion. And I have criticized the prevailing dominant worldview here on fundamental grounds. And actually, what Mr. Paternotte is doing is a bit, well, kindergarten politics with a moral judgment, trying to corner someone. This is about the Dutch interest. This is about an incredible amount of money. Europe is running itself into the ground in a war we don't need to fight, a war provoked by America, which Russia itself doesn't want at all. And by the way, the Ukrainians are the very first and most important victims of this.